I'll read the problem. It's quite short, and then we'll talk about an approach. So we've got common directory path returns the common directory path for specified array of full file names. It takes in a parameter of arrays of the paths, and then it returns a string. And we have some examples here. So here we've got our array. That's what we're taking in. Inside of the array, we have one or more strings. Those strings are made up of these segments of the path. And what we want to do is return from the beginning what is common about the paths. So both of them start with a /, then both of them have web, and both of them have images, and then both of them have image. However, we want to look at the file name as a complete thing, as well as the folder structure. So even though image and image would be the same, we don't include either one because this one is image1 and this one is image2. So ultimately our answer is this part of the file path, /web/images/ for this one. Let's look at a couple more here. We've got web assets, and here we have web scripts, and then here we have no slash at all and home, and we end up with nothing. Again, because we could look at the first character and say, okay, yeah, this one's a /, and this one is a /, and this one has no slash. Here we have /web/, here we have /bin//readme. And so we end up with only our /. And here /web//web, but no more slash, and /web, but also no more slash there. So we're just going to go with that one / here. And that's how those answers, that's how we get those answers. I see you shared a link from Twitter. Oh, this is you? Okay, great. I'll find you there. Awesome. Thank you.
Guys, if anybody wants to connect, who knows, maybe I'll have a job I can help you with someday.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so how can we approach this? Who has ideas about how they would or have approached this before? Dimitri, do you have any ideas about how you would go about it, or have you tried to tackle it yet?
So I was thinking that we could go like one character at a time, and while all the paths is same, we could collect the result string, and then when we meet a character, a case where it's not the same, we can slice our result string from start to the last slash.
Okay, let me see if I can demonstrate what you're talking about. You tell me if this is what you're thinking. So here's the two strings laying on top of each other, as it were. And here is our pointer where we're going to go character by character. So we look across and we say, okay, rather we look up and down and we see the characters are the same until here. And then what we do is we slice from the 0th character all the way to whatever index this is. And we end up with this. And that would be our solution. Is that the approach you're, does that cover the approach you're explaining?
Yeah, but I would slice to the last slash.
To this last slash.
Yeah.
Perfect. So we alter that a bit, and I would say, no, I explained it wrong. We want to slice from here to wherever this is. So in that case, maybe we even have a second pointer, and we leave this pointer behind at the last slash. So this one's going to just hang out here. And then it comes up to here. Okay, now we move this one up to here and we keep going. Oh, we found another slash. We're going to move this one up to here and we keep going. And now that we're different, we slice from 0 all the way to, again, whatever index this is, call it 12. Maybe I'm just eyeing that. And then we end up with that. That be right?
Yeah.
Okay. That seems like a very good approach to me. Let's look at one or two more and just see how that approach would work with them. So if we had this and got our 2 pointers going, this bottom one, we're going to hang back to look at the slash and we go up. Yep, same. Okay, we see another slash, we're ready to move forward. And as soon as we get here, they're different. So we're going to slice from here to here and end up with that as our answer. And we can see Oh, you know what? I'm sorry, I made a mistake, didn't I? There's 3 here. For those 2, that would be correct, but we would also have to consider this one. In which case, let us go back and say, oh, here. We never do even set this one since we never find a /. Therefore, we're going to slice from 0 to 0 and end up with an empty string. Either way, I think that works. Let's try one more. With these 3 here. Okay, we have our pointer that's going to move forward. We have our pointer that's going to find the first slash, or the leading slash rather. So we get to here and already we're done. So we say, okay, we're going to slice from 0 to 1 ahead of this one, and we're going to end up with that. Looks good. I like it. I think that's a perfectly acceptable approach. It's a runtime of n in the sense that it's moving all the way through the characters, but every character we need to check all of the different paths. So we'll have to consider that as we go. I think that's great, and I think we should code that solution. However, I'd like to hear anybody else, including Dimitri, but anyone else who has other ideas of how they would approach this or have approached this. Anybody else have ideas?
I think someone in chat mentioned regex, but I think for the sake of learning, it's maybe best to go with Dimitri's approach because regex kind of like abstracts away some of the logic.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't see that now. I just saw Deja's thing. Yeah, you know, I'm like not bad with regex, and I don't really know how I would approach this with regex, so I'm not going to do that solution because I have to think about it for a while, but there probably is a perfectly good solution there. One other idea I would have, a way I've done this problem in the past, is to split them on the /. So if we were to call split on this, we would get something like, it would be an array. It will have an empty string here, since if it splits this out, it will actually put an empty string on the other side of this. So it will be empty string, and then web, sorry, and then images, and then image 1 dot png. So although we don't have the slashes anymore, we can know that anywhere the strings got split, there was a slash before this. So of course, this would be very similar. If we split this array, do the same thing here. And the only difference would be this one was image 1 and this one is image. Oh, I messed that up, didn't I? That was not what I meant to do. There we go. Split. Great, and this one would be image 2. Now here we could do the same thing. We could go along with our pointer and say, hey, are these the same? Yep. Are these the same? Yep. Are these the same? Yes. Are these the same? No. Therefore, take this part of it. We can do something like, here is an array. We're going to call here dot join on our slash. That would give us this part of the string.
Why do you only have an empty string at the very beginning?
Because it's the only place where we had a slash where there was no characters on the other side of the slash. So when we let me see if I can.
So the split is treating it differently?
Let me see if I can demonstrate this better. It's a little, this is a strange behavior about split.
Yeah, I never seen this because I use split all the time, and that was a gotcha moment for me for sure.
Okay, so here's an example of the string, and then let's split it on this. See how it creates an empty string here? let me see if I can show one other example. If I have ABC dot split on A, it gives us an empty string as if there was something on the left side of the A and then the BC, which are on the other side of the BC. Does that make sense? Or at least you
Yeah,
see.
I never noticed this before, that behavior from split. I'm surprised I got through so many code wars without a problem with this.
Yeah, so I would think, honestly, I would think, oh, if there's a leading character, it's just going to cut it off and this won't be there at all. But the way split is working is if we're splitting on a leading or trailing character, we can see it here too. If I split on C, then I have AB split on C and then showing me, hey, you have nothing else after that C. And we could do it, of course, both if I were to put a C in the front as well. Now we say, oh, there was nothing before the first C, then we cut out a C, then we did AB, then we cut out another C, and then we had an empty string after that. What's good about it is it allows us then to take a string or an array rather, like this one, and be able to remake it by doing dot join on C. That will give us back the same string that we had here. So that is why I include that empty string here, because if we split on this and our string looks like this, we'll end up with an empty space here. Then the idea otherwise is similar though. We go through with our pointer and we check, okay, are these the same? Yep. Are these the same? Yes. Are these the same? Yes. Are these the same? No. Okay, we want to join these together, which is going to give us this. Now we still have one more problem, which is that we'll need to add a slash on the end of this. Something like this plus this in order to get the correct answer. That will give us our actual final string. So that's another approach that we can do. One other way, which is really just a variation of what Dimitri had suggested, would be something like take our first string as the default. We'll call this let reference string equals the first one. And then we will go we'll go element by element and compare it. So we pull this one out and compare it. And we simply go along and we're just doing exactly what Dimitri said. And we're saying, okay, is this character the same? Is this character the same? Until we get to here. And like he said, we'll just cut off everything in our reference string. We're just going to cut it back to the previous forward slash. So we say, okay, well, here we found a different character. Here's 1 and here's 2. Let's cut this back to the previous forward slash, which is there. And now we're done. But if we had another string, we would just do it again. We'll just pull the next one and we'll compare it to this. And we'll just keep cutting this reference string shorter and shorter and shorter until it either has nothing left or it has something left. And we've gone through all the options. So very similar to this, maybe almost the same, but slightly different, I think, in the concept of how we do it. Great. Anyone else have ideas they want to explore? Let me check the chat. I'm sorry, I'm not always the best about that. Me too. Well, then I'm not sure. Are you guys talking about how to do it with regex, not knowing how to do it, or something else? If you don't know how to do it with regex either, we're out of luck.
I think they're talking
Everybody's
about
surprised about the split. Got it.
split
Okay.
gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. Something good to know for sure about using split. Okay. Let's try doing it this last way first with essentially a variation on what Dimitri suggested. We're going to set up our reference string. We're going to cut our reference string as we compare it to every other string, and then we're going to return our reference string finally in the end. So let's review how I would typically go about solving these problems. This is if I'm in an interview, the steps that I would recommend. So the first one is read the problem aloud. I see often that people have trouble not reading aloud, but reading aloud and comprehending. So if you do, I suggest you spend more time reading aloud. Doesn't even have to be computer programming problems, right? It can just be out of a book. Most of us don't have a habit these days of reading out loud, so it takes a bunch of our mental energy to do that, and it's hard to then figure out the problem. You don't always have to read aloud when you're in an interview, but oftentimes you do. Here then we restate the problem in our own words. This is another thing I see many people struggle with. What I'm looking for here is a concise and clear restatement of the problem from the candidate. So in this case, we would say, okay, so in this problem, given an array of strings, we want to find the longest common path from the first character to wherever there is a new folder or file starting through the whole string, something like that. Even I'm struggling with that a little bit. It takes time and practice to restate it in a way that represents the technical contours of the problem, but also keeps it concise. I think we haven't noticed that behavior was split because when you loop through an empty string, it doesn't alter the behavior of our if statement. Also true. Okay, next we give examples. Actually, there's kind of a to be here, which is, we'll call this to be ask clarifying questions. An example of that with this problem would be something like, how many paths could I get? What is the longest path that I might be looking at? Will paths only have the characters that I'm seeing here, namely lowercase letters, numbers, and forward slashes, or should I consider that they might have some other paths or some other characters as well? I don't think you need to like manufacture these kind of questions. I think they are just kind of natural. If it's not clear, you ask. If it's clear enough, you don't ask. If you don't ask here, but it becomes unclear later, you stop and ask. It's not that big a deal. I don't think you need to like think like, oh, how am I going to think of good questions here? With the more you do it, the more you're going to say like, oh, I've got hung up on this before. Is that something at play here? Should we be thinking about that? Oh, no, that's not. We don't need to worry about that. Or yes, we do need to worry about that. The other thing with clarifying questions is if you are, for example, with no interviewer at all, and you're just with an automated assessment, you should have all the information you need because there's no one to ask questions to anyways. If you're in more of an environment like, hey, let's open up Replit or let's open up CoderPad and let me just tell you about this problem, there's a very good chance that that interviewer is looking to you to ask clarifying questions. They're purposely putting you in kind of an ambiguous environment where you don't know exactly what all your inputs are or what all the parameters are of the problem. And it should sort of be a yellow flag for you. Hey, there's probably some ambiguity here and they're probably looking for me to ask clarifying questions. Whereas if they're giving you, a HackerRank problem and it's very well defined, yeah, it's probably not. There's probably a lot more information provided by HackerRank there. Okay, give examples. This problem has 4 examples. In fact, this problem has more examples than it does description. We don't need to work too hard then to give more examples here. Many problems, though, especially in an example like this, where they might say, okay, here's kind of the problem, or maybe they have a little bit of text up here that's commented out to explain it. I would recommend you give some examples. Even in a problem like this, I would say, okay, let me just make sure I understand. So what we're talking about is one or more paths. This path may or may not start with a /, and then it may or may not end in a file name. There's also the possibility it could go straight to a file name, something like that. Of course, I could get files of different types, so I could get something like that. And then what I'm doing is I'm looking at an array of more than one of these. So let me take this one as an example. And I could have one or more. In this case, let's do test/file2.doc. And then I'm looking for the common path here. In this example, there is no common path because this one starts with a / and this one does not. However, if I made an example like this, then the common path would be that / plus test plus /. Am I understanding this correctly? So I've just put up 2 quick examples, and then I check in with the interviewer. Am I understanding that correctly? Does that match your understanding of this problem? Yep, that's totally it. If there's no examples, I might do 4 or 5 or 6 of these to make sure I understand the problem. If they already have 4 examples, I'm probably fine just jotting down 1 or 2 quick examples like that. Later, all of these examples will become my tests. In fact, we can see that they've already built a lot of tests for us here. So I'm going to loop those in later in the process, but this is one of the best ways to surface either your own misunderstanding of the problem, or sometimes the interviewers, frankly, misunderstanding of the problem, or just get on the same page. Maybe we both understand a little bit differently. Of course, the interviewer is the boss, so however they understand it is the right way, so to speak. And they may then also suggest to you things that you're overlooking. Oh, well, have you considered this? Or what would happen if this, or whatever else? Any questions until there from you guys? All right. If you have anything, let me know. Is there a point where we learn how to write tests? Yes, we're going to write tests in just a second. Next, we're going to do write our pseudocode. I actually prefer to write tests next, but I see lots of feedback from interviewers, and many of them, though not all of them, really are looking for pseudocode when you're solving a problem like this, to a point where I can't deny it. So I typically teach writing your pseudocode next, and then we'll go to some testing.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
pseudocode is something that's pushed by the bootcamp on the devs. We're doing something called prep. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's very similar to what you're doing, but yours has extra pieces though.
Yeah, I have actually watched Leon teach that before, and I agree with him. And then I think like, oh, I think it doesn't. I think if you go a little bit further, you even do better by yourself in interviewing situations. But I really don't disagree with what he teaches. But
I like the fact that you're adding more like verbalizing and thinking through the problem, because for some people they're very strong with logic, but like they get caught up with the words that are being used to describe the problem. And so if you don't understand the problem, all of that strength will make a difference.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about how we put down our pseudocode. So I'm going to write it out as comments. I'm going to try and keep all of my pseudocode 1 for 1 with a line of code that's going to come next. So what I wouldn't want to do is something like this. Go path by path, looking for same chars, and then shortening the first if chars don't match. In my opinion, this is like fatal. I would not hire you. I'm kind of kidding, but like this does not tell me at all how to write this in code. This is not what I would recommend. One of the big giveaways here is there's an and. If you use an and in pseudocode for anything but logic, and the logic would be like, if this and this, that would be an appropriate use of and in pseudocode. But if anything else, it's like, oh, at the minimum, that just means we need to start a new line of pseudocode. But I just give that as a bad example. We're going to go back and start over again. How are we going to start? We're going to start with create reference path from first path in array, or in paths, if we want to call it that. I'm going to change the spelling to American spelling, or I will mess that up. So first path in paths. Okay. Then I'm going to say iterate through each path starting at the second. Notice I don't say it's a for loop, it's a while loop, it's a for each loop. Doesn't matter, right? It's my choice as a developer what I use, and depending on what language I'm using. But all I want to express is the concept of iterating through. And then I indicate that I'm going to start at the second because I've already created a reference from the first. So I don't need to go through the first. Now, when I'm talking about what I'm going to do here, I'm indenting to show now this is inside of the loop. And I'm going to go to my next step inside of here. Once I'm iterating through the loop, I'm going to iterate through the shorter of the reference path or the current path. And that makes me think we should probably just go ahead and set up a variable. Create current path variable for, I don't think we need to say what it's for. It's for the one that we're iterating through here. Iterate through the shorter of the reference path or the current path. Now, I've said iterate again. This means a new loop. And again, I'm going to indent inside of that loop to say, what are we doing inside of this loop? We're doing a couple things here. We say if char of reference string is different than char of current string. And now again, I indent inside. I'm showing I'm not only am I inside of the loop, I'm inside of this if statement. I want to cut reference string to how we're going to say this, to last forward slash. But it's not the last one, it's the last one from the current index. Cut reference string to last forward slash before current index, something like that. And I would probably point out to an interviewer, I'm not super happy with how I'm expressing this line here. And I would, if I could, I would draw out help from them. So I'm saying, what I'm saying is if I have something like web slash image 1 and I get to this part here, what I want to do is I want to cut this reference string back to the last forward slash before the current index that I'm pointing at. Does that make sense to you, what I'm saying there? And so I'm trying to make a little illustration. I'm asking them, I'm checking in with them. And if you'll do this process, almost always the interviewer will be like, oh, maybe we could say it like this, or maybe this would make more sense. Or I might say that like this, because they're going to be they're very motivated to help you if you'll follow this kind of process and move along at a good clip. Or they might say, oh, no, I understand what you mean. That makes sense to me. Okay, either one, but I'm not perfect. Nobody is, right? You're going to have times when you write out something. Now, my hope is that each one of these lines is something I can turn into code in one line. Again, we're trying to go one for one here. We've got only one thing left to do, and that is return reference string. And that would be the end of our problem. Anybody have questions about this? Okay, usually put 1 or 2 empty lines between sort of, I think of these as paragraphs, like if I was writing an essay, right? I have one concept, this all goes together, and this goes together here. And if we're right in our approach, then we'll have a good solution here. Finally, I check in with the interviewer. Hey, does this logic look right to you? Do you see cases that I'm missing? Is there something else I should be considering here? And the interviewer might just let me hang myself. They may not suggest anything to me, but often they will say, oh, how about an example like this? Or what about this? Great. If they suggest it, I'm going to check, try and factor it in, see if I can change anything. All right, now we move on to 5. Write tests. Okay. Thing I love most about Code Wars is how you can write your tests here. Let's open up this test section and look at that. They have written a lot of tests for us, which is nice. What I'm unfortunately not going to have time to do is sort of go through testing from the very beginning, though you can go back and watch some of these video lessons, and I take quite a bit of time about how to write out tests. So
test-driven development, like,
sorry?
So do test-driven development, doing them before we start coding.
That's my preferred way. I think in an ideal interview, you have time to do that. In many interviews, you do not have time to do that. Also, people feel different ways about test-driven development. You may have an interviewer who's like, no, we're not going to write tests. Like, let's just, honestly, you might have an interviewer who, after you write this pseudocode that we just did, is like, great, I'm good. I've seen all I need to see. I've had that before. You might have interviewers who say, don't write pseudocode, just get right to the code. Okay, do you want me to write some tests? No, maybe if we have time at the end, we'll do testing. What I recommend is that you take this approach that I'm suggesting here, understanding that almost always the interviewer is going to want to cut some part of this process. They're going to say, oh, no, we don't need more examples. We don't need tests. We don't need pseudocode. We don't need the code. they'll say one of those four things almost always. But what I would tell anyone is like, hey, you should set that as your baseline and be flexible enough to just say, we're not doing that. Okay, we're not doing that. I'm moving on to the next section then.
Do you think that it's because when they kind of like say that that's enough, it may also be because they got the check mark, he gets that? And the other question I have is, do you feel that test-driven development is a huge edge to demonstrate your capacity or differentiate yourself from other candidates?
I do. I do think it's a huge edge, right? If I would put someone like way ahead of another candidate if they could show me that they were a good tester. I think it shows a lot more structured thinking and how you go about a problem. And I know that me now, especially me as a newer developer, all the problems I caused were not because I couldn't write code. You can always Google how to write a certain line of code or easily ask someone. It was because I hadn't thoroughly thought through a problem. I hadn't thought through all of the cases. And of course, this is a great example here, right? I didn't think through the case. What about if there's 4 numbers? What about if there's 5 numbers? I suppose it's possible someone could do more than 10,000 or more points in a month. Well, I didn't think through this, so I didn't test it. And now it's not a very serious break, but now I've broken my website because I didn't think about that. This is much harder to teach and to do than teach somebody how to write the CSS and HTML to make numbers like this show up on a computer screen. That's fairly easy to learn, but learning how to really think through all the cases, that's much harder. This is tangential, but I give this example all the time of this little feature here with the top 3 scores. And I say a lot of times to students, I said, okay, let's do an exercise. Write down all of the cases that you need to think about for this feature here. And that's just the week's top scores with these 3 top scores. And when we start making the notes, these, of course, would be all the testing cases for this. We say, okay, we could have no current scores for this week. When those scores reset at midnight on Sunday, then there's no current scores. So that's one thing we have to handle. We could have one person scoring only. That's when the first person scores some points for the week. Great, I've got a first place, so to speak, but my second and third and fourth and fifth place are all zeros after that. Then we have 2 people scoring. And even this, we say 2 people scoring not tied. Then we have, of course, 2 people scoring tied. Then we move to 3 people scoring. And under this, we have all tied, meaning 3 people all have the same score. Then we have tied for first, tied for second. And here we have another case, which is something like 4 people scoring, 2 tied for third. So if there's somebody has 10 points, someone has 8 points, and 2 people have 6 points, who gets to show up in third place? Which of these 2 with 6 points get to show up in third place? What else? I think there's still another case here. I forget what it is. So if someone gave this to you as a job, you'd be like, oh yeah, okay, I just find the top 3 scores and I'm done. That's not quite true, right? There's actually all of these little cases that are represented by those top 3 scores that you need to think of. And again, this is way, way harder to teach than how to do the HTML and CSS or React or whatever you're working with to make something like this show up on the screen. So to me, test-driven development shows, oh, I can recognize all of these cases. I can write out the tests for all of them. And you can trust me as a developer that I thoroughly think through whatever problem you give me so that we're not on the phone or coming into the office at 11 o'clock at night to solve something that I neglected.
I've only noticed one platform that teaches code that actually does test-driven development. It's actually FreeCodeCamp. If you pay attention to the little test at the bottom, but most people don't, I don't think.
Yeah. Yep. I'm big on testing. I think it's a huge differentiator. Not every developer feels that way though. I think one reason I do is I don't have a very good mind for these kind of things, right? There's a reason I didn't become an engineer until late in my life and certainly didn't go get a computer science degree or something like that. So I really have to think through this. I think I know people who are much more naturally methodical thinkers than I am, and they tend to not drop cases like I do, but I drop cases all the time, as you can see. So I work on that a lot. And if you're like me and you're coming from a not as much of a regimented and rigorous vocation, then I think it's even more important. Okay, with that said, let's get started here. I'm going to delete all of these back to this. Now, you probably don't have time to do what we're going to do in an interview, and you just kind of have to move forward and not be super, super methodical. And any interviewer is mostly going to be okay with that. They're going to say, hey, we've only got 35 minutes or whatever. Let's just get through it. But if we're doing proper test-driven development, we want to start with something like this. We say, what's the simplest thing we could get in our paths? One element that's an empty string. And what would we expect? We would expect an empty string. That is the common path with this here. So with that done, we can go back to our code. If I run this test, it's going to run this one thing here. And I see I've got a problem on line 69. Let's see if we can run that now. Cool. And I see, yep, I have failed this test, which of course makes sense because we have written no code. Let's go ahead and solve this. So we say let reference path equals paths at the 0th index. And here we're going to return our reference path. That alone should solve this one test, right? I don't need to worry about all of this if I only have one path here. So let's run that and see if we've passed. And we say, oh, yep, I passed that test. Part of doing test-driven development in an interview is getting good so you can be fast. Otherwise, the interviewer will be frustrated. Okay, so now I'm going to go to image.png. I'm going to stay with only one element here, and I'm going to expect to get back image.png. Let's run that. And we say, okay, that passes as well. So we are okay with those two. Let's move to the next one. So I'm just going to copy this and put in another one here. All right, let's think then what our next one is going to be. I think what I'll do is I will take from these examples right here. So I'm going to just grab this array. I already know it should have an empty string. I've already done the work. So I put in that there, and I'm going to put an empty string here, and we'll run that. Excuse me. And now we have a problem, right? I've set my reference path to be equal to this. And I've not run any of this code. So what I have returned is also this. When I'm telling the test, I'm expecting an empty string. So we failed the test. That tells us we need to go write some more code. Now, this is all pretty much done for us. We've already told ourselves what to write. So now I'll get into writing this code. I mentioned before, I just say iterate through. It doesn't really matter if it's a for loop or whatever else. You can choose. But if I pass this off to someone, I pass it off to them with it's open. They can write a for loop or a while loop, however they want to do it. I'm going to write a for loop. For let path of paths. Immediately I go and wrap all of this. I don't want to lose track of how this is structured, since it's really going to guide me about how I write the code. Then I'll set up a current path. Let current path. Yeah, the way I've done this, I think I can actually skip this step because my current path is going to be this. I'm just going to call this current path, and I'm going to delete this step. Don't need it. If I was going to do like a for let I equals 0, then I would have stuck with that, but I'm okay with this. Okay, let's start a new loop here. For let char of current path. So now I'm looking at every character of this current path. And great, I've wrapped that up. Here we say, now I have iterate through the shorter of the reference path or the current path. I'm going to change this. I'm going to say iterate through the current path only, and I will deal with length in just a minute. In fact, let me make a note here. Deal with length of string. That is not pseudocode, but we'll set that, at least I won't forget it that way. Okay, if character of reference string is different from the character of the current string. All right, this is really just, hopefully, again, the way that I would coach to write your pseudocode should be very easy to translate into actual code. So if char is not equal to the char of the current string. Now we got to think about this. This is a bit of a problem the way I've set this up. I think I'm going to say let index of current path. And now I will say here if current path at index is not equal to reference path at index, and open up my curly braces and do that. Now we say cut reference string to last / before current index. Okay, here's our last little challenging thing to figure out here. How do I find the last / before my current index? My current index is this index right here. And again, if I'm in an interview, I'm thinking I would make a couple notes. I was like, okay, I could do index of, and I could try and move through and find. That would be one option. I don't really like that. I believe there's a method called last index of, but that doesn't really work for me either. That's just going to find the last one from the end of the string. I need something like last index before the given element. I don't love that. I could make a different conditional, more like what Dimitri had talked about, where I move my pointer, sort of my secondary pointer to the most recent /. That's not a bad idea. Excuse me. I think let's do that. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to change my pseudocode. I'm going to say create pointer for last index, last /. And just go ahead and do that. Notice I just write the pseudocode immediately. I don't really skip over that. To me, it's not the end of the world if you miss some pseudocode. I don't think that's some kind of terrible sin. But if we're going to have pseudocode, let's just be consistent. Let me put the pseudocode in, and now I'll just write up pointer equals. It's not 0 because I'm not sure for sure that there is anything there. So we'll just say let pointer is undefined. Create pointer for last /. Okay. Here I'm going to add and else. And this will be else if current path at index is equal to /. I'm going to need some pseudocode here as well. Else if char is a /. Here we say set pointer to this index. Okay, so our pointer equals index. Good. So now we cut our reference string to last / before current index. Great. Now we can do this. So we say reference string. Did I use that? Reference path equals reference path dot slice from 0 to pointer plus 1. Consider that slice. Let me just sidebar here for a second. So if I say image / pic.png, and then I go dot slice from 0 to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 0 to 6, because there's that's where that slice, that / is. What did I do here? Invalid. Oh, I didn't use quotes. Thinks I'm looking at a regular expression. There we go. It omits that last one. So the pointer is pointing to this. That's why I need the pointer plus 1. That's going to give me the path that I want. That's why I put here pointer plus 1. That to me makes more sense than trying to point the pointer right after the /, which just seems confusing. This is what we want to do. Okay. What else is a problem here? I think nothing for now. We still need to deal with the length, but we can do that in a different test. So, oh, I do know there's another problem. It's right here. I said start at the second, but did I start at the second? No, I did not. I started at the first. I said current path of paths. That's going to start at the very first. So that makes sense and more to me now why I did have that second step. Let's do 4. Let I equals 1. I is less than paths dot length. I plus plus. Good there. And then bring back the create variable for current path. We'll say let current path equals paths at I. I prefer this much more expressive style of coding. I know that I can just use paths at I, but I would like to have code that is as readable as possible. And doing something like setting current path equal to paths at I saves me from having paths at I all over the place, which to me doesn't make as much sense. At least is not as intuitively readable. All right, I think we're ready to run our test. Here's what our code looks like until now. It looks like a lot of code since we have a lot of pseudocode. Let's run it. A lot of times I'd say let's walk through it, but let's run it, see where we're at. Okay, we see now that all of our tests are passing, which would indicate that our code is good for, again, for these 3 tests that we've done so far. Does anyone have questions about any part of this code until here?
Oh, I have a question about index. Like,
Okay.
why let index? Isn't it's gonna be a letter?
You are right. Yes, I meant to have in there instead of. I'm not totally sure why that was working. I guess because these didn't match right away. And so it's slicing from undefined plus 1. Anyhow, now it's an actual index. This is a good. Yeah, but you're right. I meant to have in there instead of, and now index will be a number. We can see if we do this console.log. Thank you though for catching that. Index. You can see here, this is the index of the 13. Oh, I see another mistake I made here, which is as soon as we slice, we can break. I see that we don't need to go through all of those characters if we've already cut it. So let's try that. And now we see we only go through it one time. We can break out as soon as we do this. Other questions? We need to do some more testing here. We're still not done. Okay, let's pull this next example right here. The great thing about these examples is all the work is done, right? I've already done any typing and figuring out the answer. Should be this. Let's see if we're passing here. Okay, we're not. Let me get rid of that console log. I don't want that here for now. Okay, so here's what's getting passed in. Test file and test file 2.doc should equal this, but actually it expected this to equal this. So this is what I'm actually getting back. /test/file.png should give us just /test/. So let's see what's happening there. Let me pull this. I guess we have it right here anyways. Let me pull this down a little bit. All right, so this is our reference path. Like so. And then we're going to iterate starting here as we go through this. I is 1. I shouldn't have deleted that, but there's something here. Specifically, there's this reference path here. Okay, the current path should be this path right here. We can always check that if we want. So let's do console.log current path. Run that. Did I break something? Seems like it. Whoa, oh, there it is. I equals 1, I is less than path. We have this one right here, slash test slash file2.doc. Yep, that looks good. That's the second time that we're running this. So the first one is this one right here. Okay, I'm good until there. Then we have our pointer, which is null, something we should consider. Maybe this is creating our bug. And we move into here, let index and current path. Right, that should start iterating through these characters here. If current path at index, which is /, is not equal to reference path at index, which is also a /. So that's not an issue. Otherwise, if current path at index is a /, then set pointer equal to index. All right, let's console log this now and make sure that this is working. Console.log pointer. And we should see, I got rid of the other ones, right? We should see that it sets it to 0. Yep, there it is at 0. So that's great. There, we do see that first / at 0. And then I see it show up again at 5. So it goes through these TEST, that's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is the next time we see it matching. So that also looks correct. Then we go to FILE period or 2. So let's console log here and see if we get those expected values. Current path is the second one. We should see 2. And reference path, we should see a period. Now, I always try to just delete my old console logs. I can't stand having a lot of console logs going. If it was right, it's right. We don't need to just leave them there. It just gets too confusing to know what's console logging. All right, here we see our current path finds, the first one is coming from this one, actually T and /, so we could ignore those first two, but we do see 2 and a period. So that looks correct as well. Now going here, reference path dot slice from 0 to pointer +1, and then we break. So let's console log here. Console.log reference path. And I'm going to delete this here. Typo. Okay, and I see test /file.png. That does not match with what I think this is here. And also, of course, what's at least the wrong answer that we're getting for what it's worth. So let's see what's going on. Anybody figure, can anyone see what I'm missing here? 0 and pointer +1. Let's console log pointer. It's 5. From 0 to 6. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, that seems right. Okay. I don't know. Just gonna keep trying to get closer to what's going on here. Yeah, that's not working. This path dot slice from 0 to pointer +1 is not giving me what I would expect. All right, I'm going to take this over to Replit and try and figure that out. Can I not do that? Oh, no, this is not working. Typing, but I'm not getting any response here. Nope. I'm befuddled. I don't understand. How am I misusing slice here? I must be doing something wrong. Let's try this again. Is this back up? It's trying to boot itself up. There we go. Okay, so I have /test/pick.doc, for example. And I'm doing dot slice from 0 to 5 plus 1. You see, that does look correct. I think that's my understanding of what I'm doing here. Reference path dot slice 0 to pointer plus 1. And we already console logged pointer and saw that it was a 5. Well, guys, I don't know. I don't know. Return reference path. Nope. Maybe we can reach for a new method like substring. Kind of like slice. Substring is not a function. I think I just don't need to capitalize the S.
Is it possible the code is breaking like somewhere else after? Because from all the tests you're doing, it looks like it's working to me. So then I'm wondering, is something happening after this part that might be breaking, or?
It's possible, but let's comment out this one just for clarity.
Yeah.
Let's assume like, hey, let's just say we're not passing the problem. Like we're failing the problem somewhere. Let's assume that we don't know that. But even still, I know if this is not the correct path at this point, I know I'm failing for sure. And right now, when I run this, I see that this does not seem to be getting cut. This needs to be cut down to /test/.
Yeah.
And instead, I'm getting all of this. So this is to me the mystery here. How come when I use substring or slice, for example, this doesn't seem to be working? So then I thought, okay, let me go be above this point here, bring in this console log, and I have reference path dot slice. I might even do it like this. What if I just put in a 6? Will that work? You can get rid of pointer here and just kind of hard code that. Oh, it does work. So then, is it possible? Like, I've never had a problem adding numbers together here. Can I do that? Would that work? Yes. So the problem is with pointer. Oh, I know what the problem is. Interesting. So it's kind of a frustrating problem that I should have caught. The problem is that when you do this kind of for loop index in current path, index looks like a number because it is a number, but it's actually a character. It's not a number. I'm not sure why that is. I should probably just avoid using these kind of loops in the future. So if we do this number casting index to a number, now we'll be fine. So then before I had pointer plus 1. If this is a number, it's going to add up to 6 in our case. However, it's a character. It's going to be 51. It's going to take that 5 as a character and it's going to add a 1 to it. And then the slice is going to go from 0 all the way through 51, which of course we don't have.
So the in construct is transforming the index into a character.
Yeah, it's setting the index as a string number rather than a digit or
So if you use
integer number.
number on it, it will be fine. Okay.
If I use number on it, it's gonna be fine. Although that then really calls into question whether I should have, I mean, that, I forget about that behavior in these kind of loops, and that's so confusing. It's like, I might as well just use the basic for loop because that doesn't seem very intuitive to me. Now we run it and great, we're passing everything. That is a weird little gotcha to be aware of there. When you use the for in loop, the index or whatever variable you're using here is a character, not a number. This is the kind of thing that makes someone quit programming. Why isn't it working? Look, it looks the right. It should. Okay, great. And now we're passing all of the tests here. We're ready to move on. Just going to bring this one back for sure. Make sure we didn't break anything there. Okay, great. Let's go over to their examples here. Start pulling these examples in. So as I'm doing this kind of testing, I'm going from simpler to more complex tests. And if I don't pass, I just don't move on. So how I just don't move on from that test until I get the next test passing. Okay, that one looks good. Let's go to the next one. This one is all of these. And we're going to put that in here. And what is our expected is an empty string here. Let's try that. Okay, looking good. We're on a roll here. Got 2 more to test. This one is this, and we just have 1 slash. So that here, 1 slash here, on that. Great, 1 more. The other thing about this is, I think this is fine to use the examples that you're given. In real life, you're never given examples like this, right? When your boss comes to you and says, hey, I want you to build this, this, and this is why we think this would be important. They don't come along and say, hey, here's all the cases, here's everything you should think about. Hopefully, a good boss will do that with you to some degree, but most people just kind of dump it on your lap and say, great, don't mess it up. And it's up to you again to make sure you're catching all of those. So I like to see when somebody can think through that, write through that, and do all of that. All right, does anybody see any cases we might be missing? I think we're good. I would certainly clean this up here if I was going to submit this. If I'm, oh, and things like this turned out to be a non-issue. We don't need to worry about that. Let's check our formatting here. Something is wrong here. Else if break, if this, for this. Looks like that solves the formatting issue. And we are done. Looks good to me. I mean, this is all fine here. What were our last things? Our last things were write code. 7 is simply repeat 5 and 6 until done. This is my favorite approach. Takes some time. It's going to get you far as a programmer. You're never going to lack for work. And again, any given interviewer might say, oh, I don't need examples, or, oh, we don't need to write tests. But almost every interviewer is going to thrill to some part of this that you're doing. And as long as you can do all of it, you can just, oh, I don't need pseudocode. Okay, great. We're just going to go right into writing code. If you've practiced out writing pseudocode like this, your thoughts are going to be so much more clear if you just write code without pseudocode. If you just write, again, I've had interviews where I just wrote the pseudocode. They're like, this looks great. We've seen all we need to see here. Maybe because they don't understand JavaScript anyways, or they don't care, or they're going to teach me a new language, or they want me to learn a new language. There could be lots of reasons for that. So they just don't care really about your knowledge of syntax. All right, we don't click attempt until we think we've got everything covered. I think we do here. So we're going to go ahead and click attempt now. And we see that we passed it on the first try, which is awesome. That's what we want to be. I highly recommend you don't ever click attempt until you think, I got this down fully. Until then, use the tests, use the test area. And now we can go ahead and submit ours. And there we go. And now we can look at some other solutions if we want to. which I don't think we'll spend too much time on these, though. This is my second favorite feature of Code Wars, is spending time looking through other people's solutions, excuse me, and seeing how they solve the problem. Specifically looking for solutions that you find very readable and understandable. So like something like this, I would not spend a lot of time on this solution. If you wrote this in an interview, I would tell all my friends not to hire you. Not only would I not hire you, I'd tell everybody not to hire you. Just kidding. I'm not like that. I'll tell anyone that wants to, but this is very, very hard to read, practically impossible. And I would hate to have to work on code like this. This though looks much better, much easier to read. Actually, you know what? This is a student of mine. I just saw this is a student of mine, and this passed, but it has problems in it. The tests on Code Wars aren't actually thorough enough. My student was so proud of this code. And I looked at it and then I wrote him a test and I said, look, this fails. You got lucky because Code Wars didn't test this one thoroughly enough. But I was like, this code looks just like code I would write. I was like, oh, yep, this is my student. You can tell.
It has no nested loops. That's why it looks really good.
Yeah, that's why it looks really good. And it's also why it's wrong. It's also, it doesn't appropriately count for the order of the file path. And so there's an easy way to break it with certain file paths. Anyways, I recommend it. I think it's a great thing to do, to go through and read other people's solutions. And here's a regular expression one that looks like Deja left, but that Deja had mentioned something like this. This again is like, it's really concise and it's perfectly fine regarding efficiency. But if someone came in and said, well, actually, if there's an image path, but just the numbers are different, we want to count those the same. That would be like a very typical interview question, like, oh, you did it like this. Okay, well, if this little thing changed now, how would you change it? It can be very hard to edit code like this, because although I love regular expressions, they're very, very hard to understand, like what in the world is going on here. It would probably take me 20 to 35 minutes to decode this regular expression and then start to make a change. Whereas with what we did, I could probably fix it in 5 to 7 minutes to make some small changes. Doesn't mean it's bad, it just means it's a trade-off that we have to really consider. Okay, guys, oh, this is also a student of mine, Benny, up here at the top. That's cool. Not that he's the only one, but anyways, this is a more correct solution in that it will work for everything. Not more than what we did today, though. I like the approach that we took today. Dimitri, thank you very much for suggesting it. I thought that was a nice way to approach that. And hopefully it was instructive.
Yeah, thank you so much for helping me with that, because I was struggling with it like 2 hours and I couldn't figure it out.
Oh, well, it's one of the tougher ones here on CodeTrack, but I think it's a great one. I think this is very much at the exact level that you should expect as an entry-level question. For an entry-level job, this is a question where I would say to someone, if you can, do well on a question like this, you're gonna get a job. Might not be the first interview, might not be the first company, but most companies are asking questions at about this level for an entry-level job. So it's very indicative of the skill level you need to have, at least in this sort of problem-solving arena.